least one thumbs up. All right, well, we're recording. This is the Public Safety Committee. It's Thursday, May 7th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. We've convened a virtual meeting. Call to order. Dan Feller's present. John Butita.
Here.
Paul Arena.
Here.
Angie Gorel.
Here.
Dorothy Red.
Present.
And Fred Westcott. Fred is not here. We do have a quorum. I need a motion for the approval of the February 6th, 2020 minutes.
So moved.
So,
Motion by Angie, second by Dorothy. Are there any opposed to approving the minutes? Okay, the minutes are approved. Seeing that there are no notes on public comment, we will forego public comment, which brings us to item E, a resolution approving subcontractor agreement for the Department of Justice Violence Against Women, fiscal year 15 Justice for Families grant. May I please have a motion? Motion by Mr. Butita and a second by, may I have a second, please? Mr. Arena and Mrs. Gorel. Item is now on the table. Who is here to speak to this?
I believe Mr. Jakeway or his assistant, whomever.
Tom, if you're trying to speak, you're still on mute.
Thank you. It took me a second there, Mr. Fellers. Thank you, and thank you, Steve. Yeah, for item E, I'm going to ask Nikki Tickner, who is the project manager of our domestic violence coordinated court grants projects, to please tell you about that grant and what this contract does specifically.
Great, thank you, Nikki.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Tom. So the Justice for Families grant is a grant from the Department on Justice Office of Violence Against Women, and it's a grant that really supports the work of our domestic violence coordinated courts, as Tom mentioned. It's the total of the grant is $345,000, and the part that's up tonight is a small portion of that, a contract with Prairie State Legal Services for about the amount of $1,500. Prairie State Legal Services helps us with a pro bono attorney project, which is one of the projects under this grant and under our domestic violence coordinated court. And briefly, what this project does is if someone comes in to obtain an order of protection and they come back for that order of protection and there's a hearing, if the opposing side has an attorney, but the petitioner does not have an attorney and cannot afford an attorney, Prairie State can help them get an attorney at pro bono. And so it's a pool of volunteers, attorneys within the community that have been trained on these issues and have agreed to provide pro bono services. And so this contract supports administrative oversight for that project, which is provided by Wendy Crouch at Prairie State Legal Services.
Great, thank you, Nikki. Are there any questions from the committee on item number E?
Yes, I have one.
Okay, Angie?
Nikki, thank you. Nikki, is there any reason we don't include men in there, violence against women, but there's also a lot of violence that women cause against men. Is there any reason we don't have men in this section?
I believe, are you speaking to just the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women, the title of that department?
I'm talking about what we have in this resolution we have right now. Actually, they should all be changed to both women and violence against either a woman or a man. But this one here, because of the fact this is also to get legal help, why would this not also have men in here? Because there's a lot of men who don't have the finances to get legal help free when a woman is creating violence against a man. This would apply to any gender that's seeking services. The requirement is that they have to be a petitioner in an order of protection, and we understand that could be male or female. All right, because it only specifies women in here, and that's why Is there any way we could actually put the men in there too, or another word?
And Angie, this is Tom. The federal grant agency is formally titled the Department of Justice Violence Against Women. That's the formal name of the federal agency that provides the grant funds to us. To be clear and to reaffirm what Nikki said, the services that we provide locally and that we want the community to know is that we are here to provide services to all petitioners. Your gender does not matter to us. But violence against women, that's the federal agency's proper name here.
Okay. Need to get that changed one day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to the federal government. Thank you.
Mr. Arena, you had a comment or question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Either Ms. Drakeway or Ms. Tickner, this is a continuation of an existing arrangement, is that correct? Or is this
This is not actually, this is new to this grant award. If we're talking about the Justice for Families resolution.
just what we're considering now? Right.
Mhm.
So you said this grant in total is 300,000 and this is just like 1,500 of that amount, is that right?
Yes, this grant award in total $345,000, and this would be approximately $1,500 of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions from committee members on item E? Seeing none, is anyone on the committee opposed to this resolution? Seeing no opposition, we'll go ahead and pass this unanimously. Thank you. Our next item for business is item F, a resolution authorizing the execution of a first extension of agreement between Winnebago County, Illinois, and Remedies Renewing Lives for the Domestic Violence Mental Court Technical Assistance Grant. May I please have a motion? Motion by Mr.
So moved.
Nikita, second by Mrs. Gorel and Mr. Arena. And any discussion on the matter, or who from staff would like to address this?
I can address this one as well. If
Sure.
that's all right, Tom, or go ahead.
Yeah, please, Nikki.
So our domestic violence mentor court technical assistance grant is another federal grant that we hold from the same people, Department of Justice, Office on Violence Against Women. And this grant came to us because of the good work that we're doing with our domestic violence coordinated courts. We are one of about 10 courts across the country that serve as a model to other courts who want to start their own domestic violence court. We've been a mentor court since 2014. And really what this allows us to do is visit other jurisdictions to provide training and assistance to them, but it also allows us to host other jurisdictions here. So they come to visit us and observe our court. And this specific contract or resolution is related to our relationship with Remedies Renewing Life, which is our domestic violence agency here. They serve as a consultant on this project. They participate in the site visits that we host. They also travel with us when we go to other courts. This grant or contract is an extension to one that had previously existed.
Thank you, Ms. Tickner. Just a quick question. And this agreement is for another year?
I believe this one is until September 2020, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the Mr. Jakeway?
I just want to note, and I don't know if it's on the resolution itself, but I'm looking at the agenda, item F, and it says domestic violence mental court. It should be a mentor court. If we could make sure the actual resolution speaks to us being a mentor court, being one that provides services and serving as a mentor to others. This is not a mental health court.
Okay. Mr. Kalinka-Sharon, I do see that the resolution before us here in the packet does say mental court technical assistance grant. Do we require an amendment here to this to change that to mentor court, or is that just a typo that can be fixed by staff?
Probably do that here and make the direction that it's amended here on the county board floor. We could, if you do it tonight, probably get it cleaned up and get it to you for the county board meeting a week from tonight.
Okay, great. Then can I get, may I please have a motion to amend the title of the resolution to replace domestic violence mental court with domestic violence mentor court? Motion by Mr. Arena, second by Mr. Butita. Any discussion?
Yes. Just one question. Tom, who's the judge for this court?
The judge currently providing oversight to this court project is Judge Randy Wilt.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the amendment changing the title of this resolution? All right, is there anyone opposed to this amendment? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. The resolution has been amended. We are now back to discussion of the resolution itself. The resolution authorizing the execution of a first extension of agreement between Winnebago County, Illinois, and Remedies Renewing Lives to the Domestic Violence Mentor Court Technical Assistance Grant. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, is anyone opposed to approving this resolution? Seeing no objections, the resolution passes unanimously. Are there any other matters before the Public Safety Committee? Mr. Butita. Hold on a second, Mr. Butita. Anyone, if you're not speaking, could you please mute your line so that we can hear Mr. Butita, who is also muted? John, we still cannot hear you. There you go.
There we go. I was trying to use that space bar, but it didn't work. Okay, I see the Sheriff's Department is with us, and I was wondering if they're able to give us an update relative to the hiring of corrections officers per the agreement we had with the U.S. Marshals to increase staffing.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I can answer that if that's okay.
Please.
So
Please.
we have so the hiring for the corrections has been slow. We've had a limited pool of candidates. We've also lost I want to say 4 corrections officers in the last couple weeks through resignations. So currently we are in the process of trying to get to that point where we meet the number that the U.S. Marshals would like to see in the jail, but we're not there yet. So I would say that we're probably about 5 or 6 officers behind meeting that goal.
Just as a follow-up then, has the population of federal prisoners been steady, or is that declined?
So it's actually gone up by about, I think we went from, 65 to between 70 and 73. It's been in flux a little bit. The marshals have been moving some prisoners out to our jail that have been sentenced. It's a little bit easier for them to be at our jail, and they can go to what we refer to as Con Air out at the Rockford Airport. So that number will continue to probably be between 70 and 75 during this COVID crisis. And then after that, we anticipate that we will increase the number of federal prisoners. I believe for April, we billed 153,000 to the Marshal Service, and in March we billed 156,000. Remember, April only has 30 days and not 31, so we would have gotten another $5,000 for the 31st day if there was one in April. So we've been pretty consistent for the last couple months in that 153 to 156 range billing the Marshal Service.
Thank you.
Mr.
Sure.
McDonald, do you have a question?
Thank you. I'm not on this committee, but thank you for allowing me to speak. Chief Saganek, I'm curious, the Marshal Service had a couple benchmarks. How are we doing on PREA? How are we doing on the 30-minute checks? Have we improved on those areas?
Sure, we're meeting those benchmarks. And Mr. Redmond talks with the Marshal Service once a week. He has a regular Monday call with the Marshal Service, and they have been extremely happy about the way the jail has performed through this whole COVID crisis. We have been, in their eyes, or in their words, a model jail. They've actually, like I said, there's been a couple prisoners that they've brought to our jail that they were having a difficult time housing at other facilities. And then again, they've been using us as a stopping point for their airlift jail operations out of Rockford Airport.
Follow up? Nope. And let the record reflect that Mr. Booker has arrived. Aaron, welcome to the show. Rick,
Thank
just
you.
one quick question. What's the current population of the jail?
I think today it was 554, which again is down, significantly from the start. There's probably about 130, 140 prisoners.
And what's your what's your sort of feeling about the current staffing level? With you mentioned we lost a few to the population. Is the lower population with the way the housing set up, is it relative? Is it improved at all, or is it the same? Is it worse?
The staffing situation is very similar to what it was before. I remember that the jail is built or staffed based on positions, not necessarily on a number of prisoners.
Right.
So, for us, we're also in a position now because of this COVID thing, where we are opening up pods for isolation and for medical purposes that were not open before. So, the jail, the corrections officers are doing a phenomenal job. Again, staff-wise, we're making things work, but we definitely need more people.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Booker, did you have a comment?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
I'm trying a new, I've got an Ethernet plugged in here and it still shows that internet is unstable.
Well, we can hear you just fine. So we'll keep going. We've almost finished this one. So can you hear us? Mr. Booker, can you hear us?
In and out. Why is my cable not working now?
Gonna have to leave that one to the help desk, unfortunately. Try to figure
Either
this
that or
out.
he's going to have to
Okay.
to Rockford.
Yeah,
I'll try to call in here.
Try to call in. We've finished the agenda items here for the Public Safety Committee. So, are there any other matters before this committee? Any
Yes,
other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mrs. Gorel. Mrs. Gorel, you've got the floor. You're on mute.
There I go. I do have a question. I would like to know at this time, with the detention home, how many young people do we have out at the detention home, and how are we handling this epidemic that we're having right now? Are they pretty safe out there? Have we seen any signs?
Is there anyone here that can address that? Mr.
I can
Jakeway?
do my best, Mr. Fellers. Angie, they're taking everything as seriously at detention as they are at the jail, following the same CDC standards for congregate settings in terms of staffs, masking, and cleaning. They're all out there, just as the sheriff is doing the same in the jail. No instances of anything of any confirmed cases for detention.
Mr. Jakeaway, do you know how many young people we have out there at this time?
I want to say we're at 24 or 25 as of today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other matters before the Public Safety Committee? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Butita, second by Mr. Arena. Is there anyone opposed to adjourning? We are adjourned. Personnel and policies, take it over. Aaron, try to dial in on your phone. You should have a phone number if you look at the invite. Try dialing on your phone. That should help you out.
Can you hear me now, Dan?
We can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
I believe this meeting belongs to Mr. Fiducia. So in the Personnel and Policies Committee now.
All right. Thank you.
Jim, Joe, Angie, Dorothy, or Dave, I'm not seeing Mr. Fiducia on the line here. One of you guys is going to have to take over this. Looks like if you want to move through.
Excuse me. I don't have the information on it. I didn't print it out. But I know what's on it.
Joe, you want to run this thing?
Dan?
Sorry, I hear you there, Angie. Let me forward you.
Dan, I don't have the information on it, but I know a little bit about what's on it.
Okay. I'm just looking for someone on this committee needs to be up there. I see Mr. Fiducia. This is his show. All right. Dave, you're up. Dave, you're muted. Mr. Fiducia, you are muted. You're going to need to unmute. Mr. Kelly?
Yes, I just called up the agenda and the old duct, a pharmacy benefit manager procurement review and contract negotiation effective January 1, 2021. Did you catch
Dan?
that?
There you go.
I got that.
Mr. Arena, if you can hear me now, I had some computer problems.
Dan, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here, Angie.
Dan?
Dave's having, can you hear me? Dave is having issues with his computer,
Dan?
It looks like.
But we have.
Hold on, Angie. This is Mr. Fiducia's meeting. He needs to call to order.
Oh, I am so sorry. I'd like to call to order the Personnel and Policies Committee meeting. It's May 7th. We're going to call it at 6:55. Let me get to my agenda here. I apologize. I have the computer problems here. I'd like to take a roll call. We'll start with Dave Kelly.
Here.
Dorothy Red. Angie Goro,
Present.
Joe Hoffman,
Present.
Jim Webster,
Here.
and myself present. Let the record reflect we have a quorum. I don't believe we have any public comment at this point. The first item on the agenda and the only item on the agenda is a resolution, and that resolution is from Gallagher, and that is to compare pharmaceutical prices for the next 3 years. And I so move. I have a second. Seconded by Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Kelly. Deb Kozer, would you like to speak to that real quick? I don't think you're unmuted.
There we go. Our current pharmacy benefit contract expires on December 31st, 2020. So our broker, which is Williams Manny / Gallagher, has proposed to us to use one of their pharmacy consulting services to go through this process. This is about a 6-month-long process where they will take our data, the data over the last 12 to 24 months. They will assist us in the development of the request for proposal, which is the RFP. They will work with us for the proposal evaluations. They will be very involved when it comes to the finalist selection and assessment, and they will help us to review the final contract. So this is the pharmacy benefit is quite complicated, because nowadays we have our specialty medications, our compound pharmacies, there's new treatment, different things like that. In addition to contracting, we have the auditing, we have underwriting, and then we have the rebate negotiations. This 2019, our pharmacy spend was $2.4 million. 2015, it was 1.9. So you can see what the cost increase has been over that. So I think that due to the complexity in that this would be a very good proposal to go with. Any questions I can answer?
I think we've lost Mr. Fiducia again. Paul's got his hand up.
If I may ask a question, I'm not a member of the committee, but just this seems unique to me. In the end, this is for an insurance provider for just the pharmacy services. Did I understand that correctly? You're on mute, Deb.
Sorry, it's the consulting services for the pharmacy benefit.
Right, the pharmacy benefit is our insurance program for pharmaceuticals. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Gallagher is our insurance provider now?
That is correct. Gallagher is our broker, yes.
All right, so the end, whoever we contract with to provide our pharmacy services then will not be affiliated with Gallagher? It seems weird that we're bringing them to, no?
No, they are not affiliated with Gallagher in any way.
So Gallagher provides our health insurance, but Gallagher doesn't provide the pharmaceutical portion of our health insurance?
They recommend who we go with. They give us recommendations of vendors, and then we choose the final vendor based on their recommendations.
Okay, I guess I've just never heard of, I'm just used to insurance covering everything. So.
Well, our broker does provide us with everything from dental to life insurance to Aflac to everything. This is just another service that they provide us with. This service was not available to us 3.5 years ago when we implemented our current contract, because Williams Manny wasn't with Gallagher at the time. They've just merged with Gallagher over the last 2 years.
Okay, so would Gallagher receive a commission on whoever is the selected vendor?
There is no commission on this. Gallagher gets paid a flat fee per year. And that fee is not increased in many years.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure if I completely understand it, but thank you for answering those questions.
May I ask a question?
Certainly.
May I ask Deb? What is
Yes.
our benefit of having this consultant?
I think it's what they're going to do for us when it comes to reviewing our data and negotiating the rebates and the discounts, because discounts can be all over the board when it comes to whether it's a formulary, a non-formulary. The contract, and Ian Johnston sat in on the last contract negotiation with us. Our rebates used to be about $125,000 to $150,000 per year. This last pharmacy contract that we negotiated last year, our rebates were $799,000. So they do a very good service for us when it comes to placing this benefit and negotiating the terms of the contract.
And it's no cost to us.
No cost to us. As you can see, I'll address it on page 9 for those of you that received it. It does state that there's a consulting fee of $35,000 that is paid. The county does not pay that. The company that wins our bid is responsible for paying that.
Thank you. Paul, does that help you at all?
I did see that we're not paying them up front, but if it's part of the contract, I assume we pay for it, eventually, right, in total with the contract?
Not the $35,000. No, we do not.
Okay.
They're going to get our business, and they're going to make money off of us with the cost of the prescriptions and different things such as that.
Okay, so this is a new thing, but you feel, Deb, that this is a good thing for the county to do, right? You have no
Very
reservations
good.
about it?
Steve and I have been looking at this proposal for probably 3 months, because at first we're like, why would we even consider this? So, and I think it's really important to keep those rebates at the level in which we're receiving them. And we have some case studies, one from 1,000 Life School Group and one from 1,000 Life Public Sector Company, where both of their rebates are between $700,000 and $900,000. So it's really important for us to keep those rebates up there due to the cost of what we're spending per year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. I've joined on my iPhone, but I did check into it, and whoever wins the contract will pay the fee. So it's a win for us.
Hey.
I don't know if you guys are.
Hey.
You can be heard, Dave.
Can you hear us?
Yeah,
Steve
can you
Schultz
hear
is
me? I'm having.
Steve Schultz has had his hand up in the air.
Okay, I'm on the iPhone, so Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just this is more just a point of information. I don't know if it will be helpful or not, but one of the things that we've identified within our own self-insured program where I'm employed is that the prescription drug portion of our cost has dramatically increased, just as Ms. Crozier mentioned. So we're seeing the same thing. We actually are paying as much in pharmaceutical as we are all of the other medical services. That's for our plan for this last 12-month period. One of the things that has been a huge benefit to us is joining up with a coalition of folks from our industry that came together to form that coalition with the largest of the entities really carrying the weight from a legal and professional evaluation standpoint for the entire consortium. And that has saved us a phenomenal amount of money, on top of the fact that we, as a smaller shop compared to some of these larger partners in the coalition, don't have the legal staff. We don't have the benefit specialists to evaluate the kinds of things that Ms. Crozier was mentioning in terms of the rebates and the formularies and the percentages and all of this. And so having highly trained people who really understand how it works is exceptionally beneficial. So with all of that being said, if there is such a thing as coalitions that counties might have access to, whether it's national coalitions or whether it's regional coalitions or whether it's state coalitions, if they haven't been formed yet out of governmental bodies, they really ought to be formed, frankly. And so, it seems like even if it doesn't exist today, which I would hope it would, we might be able to suggest in our dialogue with other surrounding counties and with, with the state and with regional entities, the idea of forming a coalition. It saved us a phenomenal amount of money, and I'm confident in it because, again, people who know a lot more than I do are the ones that are running it. Thank you.
We're actually part of a coalition with this contract. I believe that's why our rebates are what they have been over the last couple years. It's Employers Health Coalition, and they joined us they joined us along with Optum October 1st, 2017, when we entered into this contract. That's a very good point.
Well, I guess I just would follow up that the coalition that we partner with, because they're like-minded and they're like groups, we don't have to pay $35,000 to be a part of that.
Because we're not going to pay that. The prescription vendor is when they win our business. So that's one positive.
Well, I heard that said repeatedly, but I'm more in Paul Arena's camp in terms of we'll pay it one way or the other. I think that's very likely. That's all I had, Mr. Fiducia. Thank you.
All right. As was said before, there's no cost to the county on this. They're shopping around. And one of the things I talked with the company today or yesterday is the president is changing a lot of these drug policies now, and things could change. So it would probably be good that we would be doing something like this. However, I do agree with you. We're going to pay one way or another. And if there's no further on that, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And I'm an aye. Okay. Any opposed? The motion carries. No, any for other matters to come before this committee? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion by Mr. Hoffman, and like I said, I'm having problems, so I'm assuming there's others. All in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
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 And we're adjourned, and I apologize, and hopefully I can get my daughter to come in and fix this computer. Thank you.
All right, so I guess we're up to the Finance Committee now, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. for the Finance Committee, Thursday, May 7th. It is 6:12 p.m. So we'll take roll call. Myself, present. Mr. Hoffman.
Present.
Mr. Hoffman. Mr.
Present.
Gurl. Mr. Gurl.
Present.
Mr.
Here.
Fiducia. Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. McDonald.
Present.
All right, I see that he's there. So with that, let the record reflect, we have quorum. The next item is the approval of February 20, March 5th, 2020 minutes. Can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Mr. Gurl, and I'm going to say
Moved.
Mr. Hoffman. So all in favor of approving the minutes for February 20 and March 5th, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. Mr. Chapman, do we have anyone that is going to speak to the committee at all signed up?
No, Mr. Chairman, no one.
All right, then we will go ahead and admit that segment, the public comment, and move on to letter E, which is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $4 million of general obligation bonds, the alternate revenue source of the county, of the purpose of paying the cost of constructing, maintaining, and improving county highway, roads, bridges, providing of the pledge of certain revenues to the payment of principal and interest of bonds, and for the levy of property taxes sufficient to pay such principal and interest, in the pledged revenues insufficient to make such payments, and providing for the state sale of the bonds to the purchase thereof. Can I get a motion and a second? I believe Mr. Hoffman motion, and can I get a second?
So moved.
Mr. Gurl. All right, so I'll hand it over to Mr. Chapman to kind of deliberate. I believe we kind of talked about this, but there's more language to that. So Mr. Chapman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, we are originally going to sell these bonds back in, I believe, at the March 23rd meeting, and then things went upside down in the bond market and so on. So we did not at that time go forward with that. We've been looking at doing what's called a parameters ordinance, which this particular ordinance is, which would allow us to sell within the next 6 months the bonds, if the interest rate is such that it gets back to where we initially thought it was going to be at. The bond attorneys up to last week had indicated that they would not approve an opinion if we did not have a live meeting with at least a quorum of the county board at that particular meeting. I explained to him that that was not going to be possible because of the stay-at-home order, the 10 rule, or the 10 individual at a meeting issue, and they finally agreed last week. Their firm actually changed their position and indicated that we could have a virtual meeting if we have someone in the county boardroom at the time of the meeting. So it's my intent to be that individual in the county boardroom next Thursday night. What this will do is, as I said, it's a parameters ordinance. It indicates that if we once we see that the bond rate, the bond interest rates are such that we want to go ahead and sell, between ourselves and our fiscal advisor, will go forward and do that. I suspect that hopefully will be at the end of May, the first part of June, so we can get the funds that we need. The other issue is because of the bids that we did receive on that particular project, we will be issuing less than the $4 million. That's what's authorized. We'll probably be issuing probably in the neighborhood of 3.3 million, based on the bid costs and the other costs for the other project that we're talking about. And that'll probably save us over that time period that we pay the bonds off about $85,000 a year. But we'll make that decision once we determine what particular day that we're going to sell the bonds. The way these parameter ordinances work, it authorizes the chairman or the administrator to go forward with the bond sale, and it would not come back again through the board.
Okay, is there any questions?
I think, yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Salgado. I think this was the same type of premise that we did when we sold the bonds for the retirement fund. I think it was the same type of deal. There was a parameters ordinance that was approved, and then at a later date, the actual bonds were sold.
Is there any other questions regarding this item? Mr. McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for Baxter Road, right?
That's one of the projects, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that it was what we were speaking of earlier. And Steve, if they would rather have an elected in the room with you, or I can do it by myself, I'd be happy to show up at the chambers next Thursday for this meeting.
Well, I'll be down there, so it won't be an issue. So thank you.
All right, any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. We'll move on to the next one, which is a letter F, an ordinance authorizing the issuance not to exceed $2.6 million of general obligations, refunding bonds, alternate revenue source of the county for the purpose of refunding certain outstanding alternate bonds for the county, providing the pledge of certain revenue and payments, principal interest on the bonds of the levy of property taxes sufficient to pay such principal and interest. The pledge revenue are insufficient to make such payment, and providing for the sale of bonds to the purchase thereof. Can I get a motion and a second? Mr. Girl, and second. Mr. Hoffman, thank you. Mr. Chapman. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the other bond issue that we had talked about. This is a refunding issue for I believe it's the 2010 bonds that were issued to finance the acquisition of the building and renovation at 555 North Court. Our financial advisors looked at this, and at the time, back in March, it was an attractive issue to refund. However, at this point in time, the numbers aren't working out. So what we'll be doing again is just approving a parameters ordinance, and then once the numbers come in the way that we feel is appropriate and we're saving dollars, and we'll go forward with this refunding issue.
What's the time frame on that parameters?
I believe it's 6 months. You have to do the transaction within that, and I suspect that we'll probably be doing this one probably in June also. A lot of it had to do with, what happened in the bond market after, things went haywire in March. So,
yeah. Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious. One of the things that we have later in the agenda is just the deficit scenario, and I'm curious, when will the next time that our bond rating is up for evaluation will that be on a schedule, or will that be when they look at these particular bonds, or do you know?
Well, they actually, back in March, Moody's did a review of our finances. However, it's always a year behind. So I suspect probably the next issue that we may do, or if there's another funding or financing that we end up doing. For right now, they retained our current status, AA2, I believe it was.
So the next time they would look at that would be, I'm sorry, the next time they would look at that would be when we do another bond issue, or would it be on a schedule?
Normally, they just look at it as on the normal, when we do another bond issue. They don't necessarily review them each year. We give them the information and everything, but they don't necessarily look at the rating until we have another issue.
And then last follow-up, you say there's a year lag. So this year's additional deficit would not impact us as it relates to the bond rating for another 12 months?
No, I'm just, in terms of the particular items or the financial information that's included in the Moody's report, it really reflected the information through 2018, because at the time our 2019 audit was not completed. So the next time that they review that, they'll be looking at the 2019. I'm sure they will be inquiring as to what's going on in terms of this COVID-19 issue. They don't just necessarily look at the financials. They ask about projections and other issues that are going on. So I'm sure the next time we talk to them, that particular item, or those items will be brought up. And they may already be reflective of in the financial statements.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Salgado.
Not a problem. Anyone else have any questions, comments regarding the 2.6 bond issuance ordinance? See none. All in favor, signify by aye or raise your hand, whichever you prefer.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next item, which is the ordinance imposing a special retailer's occupation tax for mental health pursuant to the authority granted in Chapter 55, Act 5, Section 5-1006.5 of the Illinois Compiled Statutes. Can I get a motion and a second?
So moved.
Mr. Gurr and Mr. Hoffman, second. Thank you. Steve, do you want to touch again that we're bringing it forward again?
Sure. This particular ordinance was brought to the board and approved back at, I believe it's April 8th meeting. After that approval, the ordinance that was approved, along with the other information that they required, was sent down to the Department of Revenue for their approval. We did receive correspondence back from them that the information or the ordinance that we did approve would be okay for them to go forward with the effective date. I think it's July 1st, 2020. However, they asked us to incorporate some additional language in the ordinance to satisfy their needs. So really, this is more of a cleanup from what the Department of Revenue is requiring us to incorporate into the ordinance. Again, they've already approved setting forth the tax as of July 1st. This is just a cleanup.
Absolutely. Any questions on the ordinance? Yes, Mr. McDonald.
Just want to verify, it is directed by the Department of Revenue. It's not the Mental Health Board that's asking for the changes?
This is by the Department of Revenue.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding this item? Seeing none, I will take a vote. All in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is the 2020 budget projections. Mr. Chapman, I'll hand it over to you and the finance team.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We sent out an email later on today. We finally finished up looking at all the numbers in terms of both the general fund and the 1% fund. We're still looking at the other funds because those are going to be impacted by the COVID also, especially the funds that relate to the courts and so on, since they've been shut down since March. But the sheet that we did send you reflects what the actual numbers were for 2019. The revised budget is really what the original budget that was approved by the board, plus any changes that we may have made this fiscal year. And then the projected reflects what we're looking at in terms of revenue numbers through the end of September. As you remember, I think a couple of weeks ago, we had given you a sheet that for both the general fund and the 1% fund that looked at the major revenue sources that were in that particular fund. We didn't look at all of them. At that time, we didn't have time to look at all of them. This particular sheet here, we did go back and look at the other revenues that we had not looked at back then. And so this is a more complete picture of where we're projected to be come September 30th. Again, that's just based on assumptions and the logic that we used when we looked at the other revenue sources. Things change every day, I guess, in terms of what's going on out in the economy and so on. But I guess this is our best effort in terms of looking at everything. In the general fund, again, we had our revised budget was a little over 56.3 million. We're looking at a little under 52 million, so a difference about 4.3 million. The expenditure side is actually many of the departments, with a couple of exceptions, have been, had job vacancies, things such as that over the course of the year, positions that have been kept open and so on. So on the expenditure side, we're doing fairly decent in terms of compared to budget. With the exception maybe of the sheriff's department that we spoke about previously in terms of both their personnel and their supply side, as far as potentially being over budget by a significant amount. So in terms of, let's see here, the general fund expenditures, about 49.5, and we're actually looking at about 49, so about $500,000 difference there. Actually, a favorable balance there. And then, as I mentioned, the revenue shortfall in the general fund from the different funds. The 1%, again, we revised budget was about 29 million. It's actually we're projecting revenues about 26 million. So about a $3 million shortfall in that particular fund. Expenditures are actually fairly close to what our budget numbers are. And again, this is primarily just because of some of the departments not spending all the dollars that they have. But when you look at everything in total, between the two funds, that's on the first sheet that I sent you. the total reduction that we're looking at for these two funds is over $6 million. When you look at the revised revenues and the revised expenditures. And again, it's our best estimate based on going through the individual budgets and so on, but those things can change tomorrow. As far as the combined equity, if things fall into place, like we said, it's between the two funds, it'll be about a little over 19 million, and that's below our 25% that we want to keep in that particular fund. Obviously, the bigger impact also is the fact that a lot of these revenues are going to a certain degree, carry forward into next year with next fiscal year with what's going on with the economy and so on. So that's obviously a big concern in terms of putting together next year's budget numbers. So I don't know if anybody has questions on relating to this. Again, I apologize for getting it out late, but between the finance department and myself, it was a little bit of a work to get everything together. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Mr. Schultz, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just curious, Steve, when do we plan on getting into the budget process for the following year?
Well, I think the next item on the agenda is the budget policy, and it talks about the calendar and so on. I think it's probably going to be like tomorrow, so it's going to be fairly quick.
Follow up, Mr. Schultz, or are you good? Okay. Anyone else have any questions, comments regarding the information that was provided? Yes, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chapman, I know you'd sent out an email more than a month ago to the department heads asking about their budgets and how they feel this is going to affect them. I think it's worthy of a follow-up email, unless somebody's replied to you that we haven't seen. I think I've only seen 2 department heads reply to that, maybe 3. I think we're within our rights, we're pretty close to it anyways, to do emergency budget amendments for reductions. I would encourage you to maybe reach out to the department heads and other electeds to find out, hey, what can you cut back? What can you reduce? I was looking at your sheet that you emailed out late this afternoon, and we're going from a 25% balance potential. I think it said it was either 22 or 23%. So I am very interested in maintaining that 25% fund balance. I think we need to reach out and see what additional steps the other departments can make to help us bridge that gap and get back to the 25%.
I agree. I think, to be honest with you, a lot of the departments have done things in terms of, keeping positions vacant and so on over the course of the year. And that's why you're not seeing the expenditures being below what was originally budgeted. So, but we can, we will follow up with them. Again, I think we'll share this information with them. We did have a call with them right after we had done the other revenue estimates and so on, and shared that information with them at that time. So we'll go forward with that same group of people and give them this particular information, and probably at the same time start talking about next year's budget.
Yeah, which is pretty much it's a good thing that these projections came out, because I know that next item is kind of the budget policy for 2021, which directives giving the departments on how they're going to look at their revenues and expenditures. But from this onset, it kind of gives a big projection of where we're at, and it's up to the board to decide what direction we want to go. Obviously, the departments are going to obviously give their assessment of where they think it's needed. I agree with Mr. McDonald. This is why, I kind of talked to Steve about getting these projections out there sooner than later. to kind of start giving direction and guiding them. What direction does the board want to take? And when it comes to this, do we want, obviously we're below the 23%. We're in violation of our own policy. Do we keep it at 25? Do we go a little bit more than 25? So those discussions need to be had. Provide that guidance to those departments to essentially say, hey, this is what the budget's going to be. What can we work with that direction? So we'll get into the 2021 budget, which policy, which is next, which kind of covers a little bit of that information. But once again, these are the things that, as the finance committee, will have to be talking about these different decisions, what the budget's going to be looking like, taking into account potentially, not this just year, but the following too, anticipating anything of that nature and planning long-term, more realistic. So I think it's good information. It's great information actually to kind of get us to the point where we anticipate, based on our current state, where with our revenue projections, our expenditure projections, to kind of get a sense and idea where we're at. And just for the record, we did have a conversation with the sheriff department, with our attorneys on that, just to have this discussion, of potential, kind of give them a heads up. This is where we're at. This is where we're trending, to kind of start that dialogue, especially to see if there's anything from their department that they can do as well, since they do have the highest amount of revenue in there on that aspect of it in expenditures. So we're working, trying to figure these things out, but I do appreciate Mr. Chapman and Molly and the finance team, the accounting team, to kind of putting this together, because it gives a bigger picture and kind of lays the foundation essentially, which is the next item, which is the 2021 budget policy that we'll talk a little bit about. But just wanted to give a little bit of information, background on this, and what we intend of doing with this information, and trying to guide the county as a whole in what direction we want to go to ensure that we maintain that balance and we just continue to keep the county operating where it's supposed to be. So with that further said, is there any other questions, comments regarding this information? Mr. Chapman, do you have anything? Mr. Webster, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I'd just like to know, and when we're getting into this there, as far as our different departments go, I'd like to know which departments are on course to being within their budget, how many are actually coming in under their budget, and how many are over their budget. I'd be curious to know that. And if they are over budget, why are they over budget? Thank you.
And Steve, I don't know if you guys have that information based on where we're at in the year. And I don't know if Molly and her team have that information available. I'm probably thinking right off your top of your head, you probably don't have that information, but don't know if you guys have done that analysis or those reports that potentially you can provide the finance committee and the board on that information based on where we're at year to date.
Yeah, I mean, that was really part of the analysis that we did look at. I mean, it was done on an overall departmental basis, so we would have something that we could put together and forward. It may not be till sometime next week, but yes, we can do that. The other thing that I'd like to mention is many of our revenue sources obviously come through the state, and because of the timing of when those revenues come in, let's say as an example, sales tax that's paid in March, the county doesn't see those dollars until June. So you're always going to be 2 or 3 months behind, unfortunately, in trying to determine what those dollars are. But once those numbers come in, it'll obviously give us a better handle on what's going on. I think probably the month of April would be probably more representative of what the impact on the economy and the county revenues and that, because the entire month we're pretty much shut down. So unfortunately that information wouldn't come till July, but hopefully the June numbers that we receive will give us some idea what's going on.
Excellent. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item, which is the 2021 fiscal year budget policy. Steve, is this a formal one that we need to adopt and move on, or is this just part of this discussion?
No, actually, it's in the form of a resolution along with the attachment.
Okay.
I'd like to, I don't know if people probably haven't had a chance to go through it, but it pretty much falls in line with last year in terms of some of the terminology and so on. But we have included in there somewhat of a schedule and
Sure.
Other information that we need to move
Sure.
forward with the budget.
So I guess since it's in a form of resolution, I guess we'll put a motion in a second. So can I get a motion and a second for this? Mr. Hoffman and someone
I'll
else.
second.
Mr. Schultz, thank you. And Mr. Girl, second. Can we discuss a little bit more the details that is in that policy that changes from last year to this year? Obviously the dates and stuff like that, but is there anything jumping out there from this policy, Mr. Chapman?
Well, let me see here. Obviously, we've incorporated in there some of the issues in terms of where we're at financially, as far as our relationship to our fund balances that we want to maintain and so on. I think have indicated that once we do get a handle on our revenues, that we will be going back to the individual departments and requesting that they amend their budgets or adjust their budgets that they may have submitted to fall in line with what our revenue estimates are. I think obviously we need a balanced budget, if not something that's even balanced to the fact that we need to restore some of the fund balances that we did have. So as far as the other items, I think pretty much we have established what our priorities are in terms of our expenditures. Obviously, our debt service payments, they have to be made. Any contractual payments we have based on lease agreements, software agreements, etc. If you remember this year, we have a fairly large item that'll be coming due for the Axon agreement. I think that's in the neighborhood of $400,000 additional that was not budgeted in the current year. Some of the other expenditures that we have contractual agreements for, the RSM, or the records management system, the StarCom system. All those are agreements that have been put in place and that you need to obviously incorporate into the budget.
Okay. I know Mr. Schultz had his hand up, so I'll go to him and then we'll continue on down. Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, just because you mentioned the Axon specifically, as I recall, as that item was being brought forward, there was a clause in that contract that allowed us, if the finances were not available, that we could terminate that contract if we needed to.
Is there someone that could maybe answer that question? I don't know if Ann Johns is on, or that might have some knowledge to the contract, to answer Mr. Schultz's question?
Hello.
All right, seeing none. Well, I guess.
I think that's something that we can look at. I think there was some sort of non-appropriation clause incorporated in the agreement. So yes, we can look at that.
Mr. Schultz, follow up to that. Besides looking into it,
Obviously, this has a painful history, and I'm not looking to rehash that. But I think anywhere we have flexibility, we have to at least evaluate that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kalinkas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, I'm kind of functioning as a go-between. I think State's Attorney Height Roth would like to address something here too.
Okay.
Hey, this is Marilyn. Are you on number 10, Mr. Chairman? Hello?
We are on the 2021 fiscal year budget policy item.
Okay. All right.
Which
I'd
item
like
are
to
you-
address when you get to item number K, if I could.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Steve, do you want to continue on with potentially the budget timeline on that? We kind of talked a little bit about the direction for the different departments, and if there's budget revenue projections that come in differently, they will be required to make adjustments on that aspect of it. Can you cover a little bit about the timetable for this budget process that is laid out in there? I believe May 6th is one of the first dates, and it goes on throughout. So just, you want to just highlight quick and no details on it, but just, kind of
Sure.
walk us.
Well, I think obviously we have to have a budget approved by the end of September. So basically, you're looking at from now through the end of September. Presumably, we'll try and get the again the revenue estimates based on the best information we have at this point in time to move forward. And again, if those estimates are short in terms of where our expenditure levels are, then there's going to have to be some recommendations made to look at what the budget reductions that do need to be made. I think with that said, there's going to hopefully be a need for the once a budget is presented to the committee, for them to look at it and see if there needs to be adjustments made and so on. I don't know how that process went last year. I think it kind of, I don't know if it necessarily got fully done, but I think that's important. Hopefully we can meet in person.
Sure.
It means a lot more, sitting across the table from somebody than, looking at you on a screen. So.
Correct.
So I think that's all I have. I think we just want to get the process moving.
Sure. Ms. Height Ross, you had a comment?
Yes, based on what Mr. Chapman said, I have a question. So you've already done basically an assessment about what the department is regarding their budget that was originally allotted for and where they are currently, correct?
You're talking about the individual?
But that's what you were saying is in those documents that you sent out late today. I didn't get that, so I'm asking the question.
Yes, it reflects what our projections are for the individual departments.
So if individual departments are projected, the question is, if individual departments are projected to be within or under their budget, are you still recommending an across the board cut to all of those departments?
I don't believe we've recommended anything at this point in time. So I guess we need to, go
So I
back and look at the individual departments.
So I guess, let me rephrase the question. For individual apartments that provided you with an assessment where they are with respect to the budget that was set for this fiscal year, is a consideration going to be given to those who are either under or within their budget when you come up with recommendations for proposals to be within the budget, given the decrease of revenue?
Well, I think what we're talking about right now is next year's budget as opposed to the current year budget. I think in terms of the current year budget, we still need to look at that and see what we can do. I think Jaime mentioned that, to going back to the individual departments and see if there's further reductions that we can do in this year. But, I think another, obviously, a bigger concern is next year's budget.
Now, I understand that. I thought I heard an amendment to this fiscal year's budget, and that's what prompted my inquiry, because I think all of the departments would like to know. So I thought I heard a mention to a possible amendment of this year's budget for all of the departments.
Steve, I don't know. I mean, at this point in time,
I think Mr.
yeah, Mr. McDonald, and then we'll answer that question. Go ahead, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. State's Attorney Height Ross, it was me that mentioned that there's definitely a possibility of emergency budget amendments. I have to think that option is on the table. I appreciate everybody who's holding the budget. I appreciate everybody who sent their projections to let us know where they think they're going to end up. The other component to that is what departments are open, what departments are closed. I know several county departments are either working from home or they have reduced staffed. And at the same time, other departments, we still have people showing up for work every day, doing their jobs. I think we have to use some of that common sense to take a look at if, and I'm not saying we do, if we have to go to emergency budget amendments, what the essential services, if you will, I think that's the buzzword they've been throwing around lately. Where do we really need to most wisely spend the money right now?
So from that perspective, I mean, for now, Ms. Height Ross, we kind of did these projections to kind of get a sense and idea of what that our current state is based on our current budget for 2020 that was passed. And so what we're trying to figure out is where we're going to end up potentially based on the revenue sources and the expenditures. And so at that point, we have to make a decision. One, we're within 23%. We're supposed to be 25. So the board kind of has to make a determination. Hey, are we going to, one, is it going to be covered in the 2021 budget? Is it, how are we going to get to that 25% if that's the direction that we want to, considering that we are in this COVID pandemic kind of situation, Mother Nature, kind of whatever you want to call it, that was unforeseen, unforecasted. And it's kind of one of those. So at this point in time, we're laying the foundation. That is a possible option. And we're not saying that's the direction that we're going to go here of going back and amending the 2020. But based on our projections, we are at that 23% level. Obviously there's some departments out there that are actually have a bigger hole that, essentially we have to close the gap on. So that's essentially what we're trying to do here, and kind of think forward as well for 2021 is like, what do we do there to ensure that we close that gap, and slowly, those revenues, what's the impact going to be going forward as well, to kind of gauge, make decisions on where we should be on that perspective. I know it's not answering your question in a sense like, okay, well, what does this mean for the current year at this point in time? But like I said, possible that we might have to look in, it's really up to the board, what direction we want to move into. I know Mr. McDonald said that that's a likelihood possibility that we might be there, we may not, but it's something that, we need to address and bring forward, since we at least have some time that maybe we can start taking action before it's not the August or August timeframe or July timeframe where by then it's a little bit too late to take any direction on that. So I know it doesn't answer your question fully, but it does shed some light in what we're trying to do. And Steve, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that, or Ms. Hyde-Ross, if you want to, as a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't have
just asked
anything
a
else.
question
Oh,
because
I'm sorry.
I just asked the question.
Sure.
Thank you for the discussion, for clarification for all of the other, county departments that are, wondering what's going to happen with their staff. And so I appreciate the comments and the discussion, but that's the reason I asked. I think all of the county departments would like to know or have an idea, whether or not their staff may be impacted. So thank you.
Sure. Absolutely. And what we'll do to anything possible we can do to be proactive on that, considering, if the impact is on staff levels or anything like that, or the functionality of those departments. So, Steve, you wanted to add something?
No, I think this is, it's a moving target, obviously, in terms of the revenues and the expenditures, and that we just, decided to, look at each individual revenue and expense and come up with the projections that we have. Like I said, they may change tomorrow, but you have to have some sort of baseline to go from. So hopefully the impact on the economy won't be as bad as we're anticipating, and those numbers won't be as bad, but it could be the other way around too. So nobody knows right now.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the 2021 budget policy? All right. Seeing none, let's take a vote. All in favor of adopting the resolution, signify by saying aye or raising your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. We will move on to our next item, which is the PPE expenditures, and I believe Ann Johns might be on the line if she wants to talk to it, or Steve, whoever. I know the spreadsheet came out, was attached to the packet, so I'll leave it up to you guys. Ann, are you there? All right, I guess she's not online. Steve, do you touch base on it? I believe it was like 500 and something currently, the expenditure.
Yeah. I did ask Ann to update it from the last one that we gave the board and so on. It's, I think, up about $26,000 from the previous one. Part of the issue is the need to make sure that we keep accurate records, I guess, by all the departments in terms of what they're spending. There may be dollars spent by the county that aren't going through the EOC and so on. So the finance department has created some accounting techniques so they can capture those particular dollars in that. It's my understanding that the FEMA grants, which normally covers the expenditures that we're talking about. What?
I think Ann John's on now.
Okay.
Hi. My phone went on mute. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Let me finish what I was going to say, and then you can talk, Ann. In terms of the reimbursement amount that I understand, it's a 75-25 reimbursement amount. So we need to converse with our other parties to see that we're not going to end up with the entire 25%. So that's something that we need to address here quickly. So, and I guess I would defer back to Ann for any other comments.
Oh,
Ann, you're
thank
on
you.
the line now.
I'm sorry, my phone. I'm sorry, I couldn't get off the mute because I'm actually at the office, so I know my phone works better here than at home. So the only other thing I wanted to say is that we did send a letter out to the different long-term care facilities saying if the grants didn't make us whole in the end, we would expect some type of reimbursement from them at cost. So we had that letter just went out 2 days ago. So we're hoping we have that on file with some of these facilities that I think there's 41 or 42 that received the letter.
And just the total dollar figure that we currently are summing up to for the PP, what's that number?
We're actually doing pretty well this week. It only went up $25,000 since last week, so we're just shy of $600,000. I was told this week now we're going to have to make a few more large orders for masks and gowns, and those are kind of expensive. So I would anticipate another $50,000 spent over the next week or so. So the money part is getting better, I would say, as far as supplies, because the state is also sending us more supplies. That's why I'm able to slow down on the buying, because the state is finally coming up with some orders. Did you get my spreadsheet? You can see what the usage is.
Yes. Yes, it was in the packet.
Yeah.
So the other question I have is, when do we should expect some of these reimbursements to come through? The obviously the 75% that we're looking at. I know that
it's going to be,
you guys have been filling out forms and go ahead.
Right. From what I understand, and we had a deep meeting on Monday, all of us, and the entire packet for the grant has to be assembled and submitted as one packet. So it's going to take literally months to assemble everything after the crisis is over, because it's all the labor rate. And so let's say you have a vehicle. Well, that's not only that vehicle, it's what model is that vehicle? How many miles on that vehicle did you drive? Because and then the same thing for the pay. Everything is broken down numerous times. Is it broken down to get coverage? And so it's not just the PPE. We want to definitely get as much labor reimbursement as we can. So I don't know. I don't know how long the grant's going to take, but it's going to. I'm thinking a year. What are you thinking, Steve? I don't know.
Well, I guess it depends on when they decide that this crisis is over and so on. So I would suspect up to 6 months to a year.
Yes, Mr. Haney.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Salgado. I think the COVID response will go on for, obviously, it could be up to a year. How long the OC is open, I think there might be a different question altogether. It could be a lot shorter. That doesn't mean it's imminent or anything like that, but I don't know that anybody in the EOC right now sees themselves working in the EOC for a year unless it's really scaled down. So there might be two different conversations for whatever that's worth. Maybe that helps, maybe that doesn't, but just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments regarding yes, Mr. Schultz, and then I'll go back to Steve and Ann.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, the obvious thing is I'll just tell you that unless I've been sleeping on the job, the storyline that we've received about how this would work is changing with each meeting. So, you know, the cash flow that you had brought up some time ago, Chairman Salgado, is far more of an urgent issue now based on what I'm hearing in this conversation than it was the last time we met. You know, I really think we need to at least make an appeal to FEMA that they not make us wait until the entire process is completed before we would get some kind of an interim reimbursement, possibly through a particular date and time, because you know what just was communicated tonight is just stunning to me and really puts us in a difficult position when we're already challenged. If we could at least make the ask, if we could at least make the inquiries, if we could at least look into the possibility of trying to not have this be exactly the way it was described tonight, have more than one reimbursement, or you know, at least make the lobby effort so that we're communicating that while we are standing in a gap as a county, we don't have the ability to wait as long as what we've just been told we'll have to wait.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Anyone else, Ann or Steve, follow up to any of the conversation we've been having on the PPE expenditures, PPE?
I would
Yes,
just
this is
say
Dorothy
this is
Red.
Go, hold on,
Oh.
Miss Red, and then we'll have Ann speak real quick, and then you can
Okay.
ask your question. Go ahead, Ann.
I just want to say this is a learning process. None of us have ever been through this. The EOC is staffed by people that have never been through this type of a thing. And from what I understand, they keep, at the beginning especially, the state was changing the requirements, the types of paperwork that was done. Like I said before, it needed to be done in triplicate. And now there's a federal form that has to be completed. This is all new, and this is what's going to take a long time. But from what I understand, the state will be the facilitator of our grant, of our request to FEMA. So I don't know if FEMA would do anything ahead of time, since it's got to go through the state as they're the facilitators of it. And you're thinking about product here, but you also got to think about labor. We got labor involved here that adds up too. And lights, a phone bill. I just got a phone bill the other day for well over $1,000 for phones that normally are dormant. There's a lot of extra charges out there that aren't even reflected on my report. My report is strictly about the PPE that is being distributed. It's not about the overall cost of operating that center. I just wanted you to know that.
I appreciate that comment, Ann, because I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm not saying I knew that, you know, the health department and some other departments across the board and this EOC facility, whatever, there was going to be labor, overtime, potentially this, that, all these other things. But, it just, it would be great if we would be able to kind of like what they did with the CARES Act, where, you get qualified for this loan or whatever based on FEMA, how they were going to address, essentially reimbursement of the 75%. But that's a whole different discussion. It's good information that now we're aware of the situation, right, which creates another issue that kind of Steve has brought up, is the cash flow piece of it. So I do appreciate that information. And, I'm a little frustrated, as some others are on here, but I'm going to go real quick to Ms. Red, and then, we'll continue the discussion. And if there's more questions, we'll go. Ms. Red, you got the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess my question might be for Ann. I'm not sure. The ordinary person, how would they get protective, the PPEs? Are we giving any, just an ordinary citizen? Are we giving, they don't have anything. What do we do for them?
I understand your question, and that is a big concern. I know I forwarded each of you an email this afternoon about a program RADEC is coming out with for the business community. There is the Old Circuit City building. They've opened that up as a donation site. I'm not sure if they have masks. I could look into that, but I really don't know the answer because my new assistant didn't even have a mask. She came in here and I had to give her a homemade mask. She didn't even have one, and none of her. It's just a real problem. So I don't know the answer.
Okay. Mr. Haney, I saw your hand up. Maybe you want to address it or?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just real quick is we're not set up to provide the community with PPE. The average citizen you can go on Google and they can show you how to cut up a handkerchief and make a mask. That's all that citizens, other than washing hands, social distancing, the average citizen who's not a frontline worker can create a mask, a homemade mask. There's a million different ways to do it for a face covering as a citizen, like when they go to the store, but we're not in a position to provide that to the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Red. Anything else, Steve, and regarding the PPE information that was provided and talked about?
Not at this time. We'll keep the committee updated and the board.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions, comments regarding this? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item, which is letter K. It's a resolution, property tax fees and interest resolution. I believe I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Kerlinkis and Mr. Arena and Ms. Hyatt Ross to believe this is a first draft, so I don't know if we have to do any Robert Rules of Order to put it on a vote today. So I just want to first of all ask that question, and if we do, then we can get it on the floor, or if it's just open for discussion for the first draft. Go ahead, Mr. Kerlinkis.
Okay, Chairman, yeah, I've been working on this, but I know the state's attorney wanted to address this because obviously I've been working under her direction and working also with Arena. So I think state's attorney Hyatt Ross wanted to address this at the outset.
All right,
Okay.
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My office was asked by Mr. Arena to put together a draft regarding the topic of this particular resolution. And I want to stress this is a very, very rough draft. The only one consultant was Mr. Arena. My staff obviously looked at the legalese of putting it together. Mr. Arena wanted it for tonight's meeting, so it's there for a discussion. I want to be very clear. This is not something that was promulgated or that we're telling you to do it or not to do it, but it's a very rough draft that we put together so that all of you collectively can decide whether you want to do this or whether you have questions and concerns and want changes done with this document. So I just wanted to have that caveat before you get into a discussion. So it was put together so that you could discuss this particular issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Hyatt Ross. Mr. Arena, we'll open it up with you and talk to it, and we'll have discussion with that. Go ahead, Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the concept here is that we provide to a property owner who had their income shut down by the governor's order, essentially, to put in an application to have the penalties and fees waived on their property tax payment. If they can't pay it in full, if they do make a partial payment, and that waiver would extend up until the time of the tax sale, at which time any remaining taxes due would be subject to the normal interest and penalties. The person would have to demonstrate that their business was shut down as part of the governor's order, that they attempted to get some assistance and were denied so that they couldn't get unemployment, or for a small business couldn't get one of the loan programs that are available. And again, that they made a partial payment. So I think the questions that we need to have direction from the committee, as State Attorney Height Ross said, this is just a first draft. I only got a first look at it today. It's just kind of a guideline to move us through the conversation. If we're going to, the idea of a partial payment came through the treasurer's office. Her thought was it's better to get something rather than nothing, and this is an incentive for people to make some type of payment if they're struggling to pay their taxes. So if that's the case, what percent do we want to create as a minimum? That's something we need to discuss. As this draft is written, it only applies to the first installment, not the one due in September. I think the treasurer is accepting partial payments right now. So I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Kolinkas about it, but it seems in my mind it should apply to both payments, because if we give them a waiver on the first one and that one applies all the way till November, then instead of paying on that amount, they'll pay on the second amount if they're making future installments. I don't know. I think we could just treat it as one sum. That was my original thought as reading it. As this is written, it states that if it's a commercial property, the property owner is also the business owner. I don't know if we want to open that up. We'd have to talk about scenarios where it's a business in a property and maybe the business is paying the property taxes as part of their rent. And if the business is shut down, then should that property owner be eligible for this also? Yeah, I think those were the points that I found in my initial read of it. So I think at this point, just need to know if you're on board with the concept and on board with continuing to work on it. And then if you can provide input as we move along. The questions did come up about how this would be administered. And just so you're aware, the treasurer can't be the one, from the state's attorney's office, they said the treasurer can't be the one to accept these applications. So I talked to Lori Gumow. She said if it's necessary, her office can accept those applications, but doesn't have the time to vet them. The auditor had offered their assistance in vetting the applications. So we would create the criteria. It would be an affidavit that the person would fill out, the documentation that we specify. The auditor would go in and look at these applications and determine if the applicant is qualified. What questions do you have for me?
Yes, so this is good on that aspect for it. I think that there's good to know that it's the first draft and that we're having discussions, that we're involving different parties and everything like that. But just from our standpoint, from not just, I've been in talk with you, I've talked to Mr. Kurlinkis and so forth, but for those that, don't know much about this is, what's the overall intent? How is this, obviously it's the first payment, looking at second payment. Is there any implications based on, staff, based on revenue, based on, those things, based on, and also helping the citizens, obviously during this hardship. So just wanted to, if you could give that information so that, where you're at, on covering those pieces of it. I know you kind of already alluded to a lot of it, but, just for those that aren't familiar with this resolution and, you know, the property tax, just to give definition for it of, you know, on that aspect of it. Obviously, you know, the timing of it, the impact potentially, and, you know, you kind of talked a little bit about, you know, who's going to vet these. So just want to make sure that, you know, that, you know, this didn't just come out of nowhere, and, you know, essentially questions were being asked and discussions were being handled. So I don't know if you want to elaborate, Mr. Arena. Maybe you've already covered everything on that aspect, but it's just overall broad view. And then obviously, if there's questions, I know there might be individuals, we can address those. So you know, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to what I just said, or, you know, to answer or elaborate on some of that stuff that I just said.
Just so everyone's clear, this isn't a reduction in the taxes that are owed. So the taxing districts won't see less money. This is a reduction in the interest and fees that we would collect for late payments. So we're just looking to people who have been impacted by the governor's order. And for those people who have attempted to get assistance and were denied, this gives them some relief. And the motivation to make partial payments was, one, for the benefit of the taxing districts, because they would get something rather than nothing. And it's also to the benefit of the taxpayer, because if they're ultimately going to end up having the taxes sold because of their financial situation, the less they owe, the less the amount that goes to tax sale, the better for them. Yeah, we've talked, you know, Mr. Kurlinkus and I talked about how the taxing districts might view this. That was one of the reasons why we have a resolution that's not complete on an agenda. We wanted to get it out there to the public, let the taxing districts be aware of it, give them the opportunity to weigh in on it. If there's some concerns that we've missed, I guess we're, in my mind, if they're struggling and they intended not to pay, this is ultimately a way to try to get them to address the issue proactively.
Okay. I see there's a couple hands up. So I'll go to them, and then we'll go from there. Mr. McDonald, and then Mr. Girl. Go ahead, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been pretty vocal about not changing the timing of the property tax structures. I can speak specifically on fire protection districts and the fact that they do run their budgets based on the timing of those revenues. Mr. Arena has called me and we've talked about this, and I agree, we're in a unique situation. I'm not opposed to helping the people who need to have help. That being said, a lot of people have their taxes escrowed. I want to make sure that the banks don't use this as a reason that they hold on to the money a little bit longer. Every bit of revenue that we can get in the front door as soon as we can to help disperse it, we need to do that. I don't want to make it a large and complicated system, but yeah, if somebody's having troubles or there's a bona fide reason they can't make their property taxes on time, I fully support Mr. Arena's idea of making it somewhat painless for them to extend. But I want to stress the fact that if you can make your payments on time, you need to make your payments on time. Myself, for example, I owed federal taxes this year. They said, you want to pay April 15th or July 15th? Well, duh, I want to hold on to my money as long as I can. There's every other property taxpayer in the county will be the same way. So I would like to have some mechanism to compel them to pay them on time if available.
Sure.
If not,
Yep.
Just
Mr. Arena, yep, go ahead.
In my notes here, after I read it, I did make a note that this should apply to payments that are not held in escrow. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Kurlinkus, but if we can, you know, if it's in escrow already, the money's available and it should be paid. So I agree with Mr. McDonald on that point. If it's possible to do it that way, we should do that.
Okay. Mr. Girl, you were up next.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple points, I guess. If the applications are forwarded to the auditor and the auditor determines that they're not eligible, is the property owner then able to appeal that? And if that was a process, how would that be handled? I would imagine there'd be some property owners that would say that they should have relief, and maybe the auditor determines that they're not qualified. So that would be a process that would have to be discussed. And also other business owners, where do we cap the business owner threshold at? Let's say like the owner of Kohl's decides they don't want to pay their property taxes because they've been closed. Would we grant that owner a waiver also? Just curious where we go on this. Thanks.
Yeah, and Mr. Arena can probably answer that, but I think it's really from a business standpoint, right, Mr. Arena, if I'm correct on this, or correct me if I'm wrong, is basically if they're not able to secure that loan or from the CARES Act or the Paycheck whatever act that's out there, is that part of the process? I want to say for businesses, is that the nature of it, how we would define it?
Yes, it was. Your business was identified as non-essential by the governor and shut down. So on the example of Kohl's, I guess that would qualify. And then they have to demonstrate that they sought assistance and were denied for that also. So hopefully we can make the criteria pretty cut and dry. Now, I don't know if we want to offer this to a corporation the size of Kohl's or not. But again, we're just waiving the penalties. I'm not sure that the corporation is an angle I hadn't thought of. So it's a good thing that Mr. Girl brought it up. We'll have to discuss that and see if it's legal for us to limit it in that way to only certain types of property. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
And
Mr.
if I could just, thank you, Chairman. Just follow up. If a business, let's say Kohl's, if they don't own that property, they wouldn't be eligible for this anyway. So it has to be a business owner that owns the property in which the business is established, correct?
That's how it's written right now. My thought was, if
it doesn't say, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, so that's one of the
so
points. We have small commercial property, and the tenant was paying the taxes as part of their rent, and now the tenant is shut down for their business. That money's not coming into the property owner. How do we want to address that? I mean, maybe that's one of the things we can't help, and we just decide that that's not going to be included. It's just a point we need to discuss.
Okay, so this would basically just waive the penalties and interest. They would still have to pay the taxes on time, correct?
The taxes are due on time, and all it's doing is saying that your late if you've made a partial payment, your late taxes will not be penalized. That you won't receive the interest and the fees.
Yep. Okay.
All right, Mr. Butita, you had a question or comment? Go ahead.
Thank you. So Paul, do you have a suggestion as far as what the down payment would be to avoid the penalties and interest? If not, I have a thought about it. It's maybe a third and a third and a third. If you have to put down a third of the payment by the was it June date, and then the fall date another third, and then tax out another third to avoid payments. Is that what you're kind of thinking?
I didn't have a number. This suggestion for the partial payment came through the treasurer, and one of the conversations we've had is, what would that amount be? I don't know if they make so you're saying a third of their entire tax bill, or a third of what the portion would have been due on June 1st?
Well, you were talking about putting a down payment to avoid penalties and interest. So I'm just trying to figure out how that would work. I'm open to any number. I'm just curious how it would work or what your suggestion is.
In my mind, I was thinking if they paid, like 25% of their tax bill for June 1st on time, along with this application, they wouldn't be penalized. Or that's the other thing we have to talk about. It's like, when do they apply for it? They'd almost have to apply before the taxes are due if we're requiring a partial payment as part of it. What we want to do is encourage them to be making payments. So Sue Goral has already placed on her website an option for people to start paying their property taxes now, to encourage people to be paying in advance and paying something to get paid up. On that point, I'm open to direction from the committee, and I just think we need to make it an amount that's going to encourage people to use the program.
Sure. And we kind of talked a little bit about this, is the timing. It's June 2nd, the payment coming up, and getting the application out there and all that. If it's doable, I don't have a problem with. I just broadcasting it, making sure people are aware of it, and if this assistance there for them for the June 2nd payment, is that enough time to get this done and the process going? That's where, from my standpoint, that's a little concern. And from, seeing what Sue Goral is kind of doing right now, does it make sense? And at this point in time, how about second payment? I don't know. There's a couple questions that need to be addressed, but within the time frame, June 2nd's right around the corner. It's like essentially a month from now. So the question is, do we have enough time to get it off and going? If the answer is yes, then I say we continue with these discussions and hash down every question, like the percentage with what currently the treasurer's doing right now with partial payment, that aspect of it, and obviously answering the question about the commercial piece and some other things that we had discussion on. But that's where I kind of have a question on, is the timing, is it there, not? What do we need to do if we need to push it on that aspect for the penalties and interest? So that's the only thing from my standpoint from here. But I'll go to Mr. Girl, then Mr. Arena, if you want to follow up, whatever, we'll move forward. Go ahead, Mr. Girl.
I want to point out that the
I'll go ahead and refer over to Paul Arena. I'll let Paul Arena go, then I'll ask.
Sure.
All I was going to say is I think the payment is due later in June. I think it's June 19th, not June 2nd. So,
Mr. Girl.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. And I don't think, the timing might be tight, but we can make this retroactive to once where we get a plan hashed out in a great document where everyone can agree and everyone has input. Then we can make a retroactive. We can have people apply, and that would give them time until that last payment in September to actually go through there, have the auditor do what he needs to do. I'm thinking there probably will be a few applications. So we're going to have to see if the auditor can work with maybe the treasurer's office and review these applications. So I'm not sure if there'll just be a few or a couple hundred or a couple thousand, but we're going to have to keep that in mind that, the auditor can only do so much with the staff that he has up there. And like I said before, if there is anybody that gets denied that wants to appeal them, we're going to have to process for that. So I think it's a great starting point for the document, but I think there's a lot of discussion to be made. And so I don't think we're going to get this done before June, before the tax bills come out, to where we could properly inform the people of the process and what to do and how to go through it. So my suggestion would be to work on it and get it out there, and we can include the first and the second installment into whatever we want. So thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions for discussion? So Mr. Arena can take this, work in the background with the state's attorney and the treasurer's office and the auditor and so forth. So, okay, Mr. Schultz, I see your hand up, so I'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I promise I'll be brief. I guess just encourage you, Paul, Mr. Arena, that if the complexity of this gets too great, then it really should be set aside, because we're looking at manpower issues, we're looking at budget issues, and if we could do it simply, which I'll just be honest, what I'm hearing so far doesn't sound simple.
Okay. So like I said, Mr. Arena, I think it's great. Good discussion. I know we've been back and forth. I know you've talked to Mr. Kerlinka. So take this information, reach out to Mr. Girl. Maybe, he wants to jump on and give his 2 cents on it, and get it more information and get it hashed out. Same with work with Steve and Sugoro. I want them to be part of the process and just not feel that we're just laying things on them or whatever the case may be. I know we're trying to do everything we can right now for everybody that's hurting. So I do appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing, especially you, Mr. Arena, and the state's attorney, Steve, and the treasurer. So kudos to them. So if there's any other comments, I'm just going to move on to the next item. All right. Okay, so next item. Go ahead, Ms. Hyde-Ross.
Chairman, there was a question asked, and I want to make sure it gets answered. Someone asked, is there a delay in the payment? So for June, if this were to go forward as drafted, would there be a delay in those payments? And there would be, because there's no penalty until after that November 1st date. So the individuals would not have an incentive to pay. So de facto, there would be a delay in revenue coming in. So I just wanted to make sure I answered that question legally. In addition, when you start talking about certain individuals and businesses, you have to make sure whatever you decide to do, that everyone is treated the same. Otherwise, you're going to have some legal issues. So I just wanted to say that to the committee so you can take that, think about it going forward as to how you want to handle this.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that's good points that we need to essentially think about the process and when we're working with the state's attorney's office and some other departments on that. So any other comments before we move on? All right, seeing none. Is there any other matters before us for this committee? Steve, anything else? Mr. Fiducia, yes, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is going to involve probably this committee and my committee. And what it is going to be is I'm going to be bringing up a resolution reference compensation for the auditor, the coroner, and the treasurer. These are going to be minute amounts, and I would ask Mr. Chapman to email those out to the whole board so that way we can have a fruitful discussion on them, because we have to put those in place before the elections.
Thank you, Mr. Fiducia. Steve, anything you want to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, it's the county board chairman. It's not the treasurer. So it's the auditor, coroner, and county board chairman.
Okay, and we'll look forward to those and have good discussions about those items. Anything else, other matters? Seeing none, I know we're running a little late, so if there's nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn? Mr. Girl, Mr. Hoffman, second by Mr. Fiducia. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Raise your hands.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen and ladies, and have a good night and stay safe. Thank you.
Yep.